tales of woe and dismay about the future and some of optimism from this side. And I'm concerned as to where the common ground is in that at the moment, because it seems to me one of the lessons of now quite a long life is that nothing is ever quite as bad as you expect, nor quite as good as you expect. And it is probable that there will be a little more common ground between us than we might foresee at the moment. But we might assist that process, because growth will be what brings the two sides together. And the more growth we can achieve, the more scope there will be to deal with some of the greater calamities which might occur unforeseen, as everything is obviously unforeseen in politics. So I want to talk a little about some of the growth opportunities which we might be able to harness and what we can do. As I think I've mentioned before, one of the great messages that I've always had was a lesson from Sir Kenneth Cork, who taught me most of what I knew about corporate rescue, which was that you cannot rescue a business which does not have a successful past. Anything which hasn't got a successful past is a failed startup. Get rid of it and concentrate on the businesses which have got the successful past. And where today are the businesses with the successful past? They're languishing in the intensive care units of the banks. And they can't get out because most of them have been the victim of over-expanding their capacity beyond the demands of the marketplace. And that is a very expensive thing to get out of once you're into it. It was done with some dexterity and considerable success in the early 1970s through the initiatives which were forthcoming from 3I's investment in industry. And one of the great tragedies of our economy at the present moment is that we do not have 3I's functioning in that form today, and boy do we need them. I'm very much a believer in the principle of the collective collapse of generic groups of business as entities. Let me give you some examples. At the present moment, this year, we have probably lost 500,000 cars in our British export market, which would have been a very big additional factor to the economy, both in production, the wages that would have gone to the people who build them, and the export value they'd have had. Why? Because the banks played their usual dirty trick a year ago, 2 years ago, that they saw that there were big markets outside, big back orders, so they let the banks have the money that they needed to fund the delivery of the order books that they had. The orders came in, they took the cash, they reduced the facilities, and the automotive component industry did not have the working capital to gear up for the massive turn to the diesel engines which were demanded, and the British export market could not maintain the export requirement required to maintain its position in the international scene. That's largely being corrected now, but it's a similar problem that is going to happen. The next big crisis is going to come in the second week of February next year, when the huge crisis that comes cyclically every year afflicts worse than ever the retail section. It's already now bereft in the high street with shuttered shops, redundant staff and manufacturers out of work. And a very dismal sight it is. But what happens in the banking industry is that they know that in the second week of February, first 2 weeks of February in every year, all the credit cards that have been used to buy goods going into Christmas pay, and the retail industry has the lowest borrowings of the year, and the banks lie in wait and they grab them. Remember Woolworths? Who's coming next? So we need somebody who can take a grip on a general strategy to save the retail industry from another calamity. One of the great regrets I have at the moment is that the person who would best be able to do that is Sir Philip Green, and he's doing something else. I hope that the government will hold on to him, and once he has actually finished his present task, he will be told to go and cherry-pick the entire retail industry languishing in the hands of the banks and put together the next version of British Home Stores as a government subsidiary which needs funding and which can be imposed on the banking industry by grabbing each bit, despite some of the fact that there'll be minority bank interests which won't want to sell out for the benefit of the major bank interest, which will get the cream of the equity conversion. That's what 3I's should exist to do, and what it did so brilliantly before, and why we need it back now. There's another element of the world out there at the moment which is potentially waiting for the pratfall of a massive collective bankruptcy, and that's the food processing industry at the present time. The more the accent has moved from the small corner shop to the big grocers, the more production has been stepped up by the food producers to satisfy the ever-increasing demands of cheap food coming through the grocery chains. And of course, they've now fallen into the track again of funding themselves to too high a capacity for the market demand, with the result that the grocers can rub their hands with glee and say, we can screw the margins down so tight you won't be able to breathe, and the suppliers are going to go collectively pop at some point in the next few months because they will not be able to keep up the food supply. And there is a big social factor coming, because you will have the present dependence upon cheap food to keep some sort of society structure fed will actually end up by being forced up on prices as the industry goes out of business in terms of its ability to keep supply going, and prices are forced up in the grocery chains, and this is going to be another calamity coming, and we need to have a top-down view as to what to do with it. So I've given you 3 examples there of why I think you need something on this score, but the creation of a 3 I's on the lines that I'm talking about would be in the order of a £5 billion cheque required to do it. And we haven't got £5 billion. We haven't got half of £5 billion to put into the creation of this at the present moment. So what can we do about it? Now, at this point, I'm going to have to make a very big apology to my noble friend, the noble Lord Sassoon, because I'm about to raise a subject which I shouldn't raise, and which is going to be one which I think is now time to put on a higher awareness and to explain to the House as a whole, as I don't think they have any knowledge of. I'm sorry the noble Lord Strathclyde is not with us at the moment, because this deeply concerns him also. But for the last 20 weeks, since yesterday afternoon, I have been engaged in a very strange dialogue with the 2 noble lords, in the course of which I've been trying to bring to their attention the willing availability of a strange organisation which wishes to make a great deal of money available to assist the recovery of the economy in this country. For want of a better description of their name, I'll call them Foundation X. It's not their real name, but it'll do for the moment. Foundation X was introduced to me 20 weeks ago last week by a very eminent city firm, FSA controlled, by its chairman, who came to me, and its chairman said, we have this extraordinary request to assist in doing this major financial reconstruction. It's mega bucks, but we need your help to assist us in understanding whether this business is legitimate. I had the biggest put down of my life from the noble Lord Strathclyde when I told him this story first of all. He said, why you? You're not important enough to have the answer to a question like that. And he's quite right. My noble lord, I'm not important enough, but the answer to the next question was, you haven't got the experience for it. Yes, I do. I have had one of the biggest experiences in the laundry of terrorist money and of funny money that anybody's had in the city. I've handled billions of terrorist money. Not into my pocket. The biggest terrorist client I had was the IRA, and I'm pleased to say that I managed to write off more than £1 billion of their money. I've also had extensive connections with North African terrorists, but that's of a far nastier nature, and I don't want to talk about that because that's still a security issue. I would also hasten to add, it's no use getting the police in for me, because I shall immediately call the Bank of England as my defence witness, as they put me in to deal with these problems. So the point is that I was, in the course of doing this very strange activity, I got a very interesting set of phone numbers and references which I could go to for help when I needed it. And so people in the city have known that if they want to check out anything that looks at all odd, they can come to me and I can press a few phone numbers and get a reference. And so they came to me and asked me whether I would get them a reference and a clearance on Foundation X. And for 20 weeks, I've been endeavouring to do so. I myself have come to the absolute conclusion that they are completely genuine and sincere, and that they are quite directly wishing to make the United Kingdom one of the principal points for which they will use to disseminate their extraordinary great wealth into the world at this present moment as part of an attempt to seek the economic recovery of the global economy. And so I made the phone call to my noble friend Lord Strathclyde on a Sunday afternoon. I think he was sitting on his lawn, poor man. And he did the quickest ball pass I've ever seen. If England can do anything like it at Twickenham on Saturday, we have a chance against the All Blacks. And the next thing I knew, I'd got the noble Lord Sassoon on the phone instead. And he, from the outset, took the quite right, proper defensive attitude of total scepticism and said, this possibly can't be right. In the course of the following weeks, I had, first of all, the noble Lord Sassoon said, go and talk to the Bank of England. So I phoned the governor of the Bank of England and said, could he please check this out for me? And he came back after about 3 days and said, you can get lost. I'm not touching this with a barge pole. It's far too difficult. Take it back to the Treasury. So I did. And within another day, the noble Lord Sassoon had come back and said, this is rubbish. It can't possibly be right. So I said, well, I'm going to work more on it. And then I had a meeting with the noble Lord Strathclyde, and I actually bought one of the senior executives from Foundation X to meet Lord Strathclyde. I have to say that as first dates go, it was not a great success. Neither of them ended up by inviting the other one up for a coffee or a drink at the end of the evening, and they didn't exchange telephone